Hello and welcome to episode number 25 of In Pursuit of Clarity, entitled Deeper Than Politics, Nature versus Anti-Nature. I wanted to speak of the culture change we've seen sweeping through the West, only recently hitting a reactionary wall on several fronts and beginning to recede, and specifically move above the merely political differences to the deeper and more fundamental differences that I believe are far more important and so rarely discussed. Because relativistic thinkers so dominate academia and positions of influence and reach, so many have been led to believe that any theory or opinion or worldview is just as valid as any other. There is no immutable truth, there's no right answer, there's no proper way to live or think or be, and some of the justifications for these mindsets are compelling on the surface, or at least can be framed in seemingly compelling ways. After all, so the theory goes, aren't all of our political ideas and institutions and conceptions all man-made? And if so, doesn't this mean that they're all subjectively contrived and created according to personal prejudice? If this is true, isn't it simply impossible to tell which may be superior and which inferior, which healthy and which unhealthy? I believe this to be a profound error in judgment. And when we zoom out a bit, these type of arguments quickly lose all power and begin to look a bit absurd. And the reason for this is because we're not marooned on some spinning ball in space with absolutely no templates or guides on how to best exist. Everything in the universe, down to our solar system, to our planet itself and everything within it, follows hard and fast rules and laws to maintain something of a balance, harmony, and order. So here are our first hints as to an ultimate, all-pervasive order and structure. But let's zoom in a bit and look even more specifically at the biological entities throughout nature, an even better and more fitting proxy for ourselves, an even better model to help guide us into finding cues on how we fit in to this natural order. First and foremost, at the heart of it all, and as a prime driving force across all species, we see an innate desire for survival and expansion or propagation. This is universal, a desire for life and to create more life. If this didn't exist, life itself would cease to exist, and our world would quickly become a dull and barren wasteland. Also, we see everywhere throughout nature pairings of male and female to create this new life. We see hierarchies across most of the animal kingdom, especially mammals, formulated according to the maximization of those traits deemed the healthiest and most robust, those that best serve the group as a whole. Broadly speaking, nature does provide us a very real guide, and in fact, the only valid and objective guidelines, not invented out of whole cloth by a self-proclaimed intellectual. Anything above and beyond this, and especially anything that contradicts or counteracts this, is objectively unnatural. And it's a very short jump from that word to add its near synonym, unhealthy. So much of what we're learning lately, from both the world of science and that of routine observation, points to the fact that straying from this natural and healthy manner of living is costing us dearly. Our processed foods, treated water, and dirty air are all leading to an explosion of diseases and ailments not known in past eras. And nearly every freshly crowned superfood, like eggs, or fresh fish and game, or fresh berries, are those exact things our ancestors ate freely and in abundance. We're discovering office life tends to be profoundly unhealthy on mind and body, and that a variety of regular physical activity of the type we used to engage in routinely has immense benefits. In short, in nearly every way in which we've deviated from our more natural mode of existence, we've paid a significant price. And all of these things combined can't help but scream out to us, change slowly. And I tend to think, culturally speaking, the West would have opted to change quite slowly if left to its own devices. But, of course, we weren't. One of the most potent minds of his age, and nearly every other, Johann Goethe, once said this in speaking about an ambitious minority population on the European continent. Quote, "This crafty race has one great principle. As long as order prevails, there is nothing to be gained." End quote. I've come to believe this is one of the most profoundly important realizations in the modern age, simply and masterfully stated. Although the natural order of things may be our healthiest ideal, there is no profit in it. There's no easy means by which ambitious men might gain power or influence and further clamber up these ladders. For this to happen, one needs to inject chaos or disease or ailment and position oneself, in turn, as the physician ready to treat it. This process, in our modern age, seems to me to be analogous to a physician prescribing a, quote, cure for a supposed ill, only to have 2 more ills result from this prescription. Another physician is there to prescribe 2 additional cures for these new ills, which, in turn, spawn still more, and so forth and so on until we're layers deep in wholly contrived sicknesses and diseases of our own creation, and with this particular brand of physician elevated to ultimate power in the process. I believe this analogy to be a powerfully accurate one across politics and culture, technology, medicine, and the financial world, a bumbling descent into contrived complexity, with the new and novel always painted with the brightest and most attractive colors to further goad us along, and a naive and overly trusting public sharing that universal weakness ingrained in our DNA to chase the new and exciting, sprinting into ever darker territory as they move further down these paths. The push towards LGBT lifestyles that's led to a massive explosion in same-sex partnerships over the past decade or two, the propaganda against having children or the traditional family unit with a father and mother, the railing against all hierarchies, all merit-based differences, the denial of men and women being biologically different, and the aggressive championing, one could even say celebration in some cases, of abortion, take the essence of all of these things together, and one might easily label this something of a death cult, or at the very least, an anti-creation and anti-health cult. Even language is deeply marred by this element. Personally speaking, I try very hard not to use overly complex terminology, and insofar as possible to speak using root or essence, words and concepts, if this makes sense. And one of the greatest aspects of the Western tradition is that Spartan and Stoic simplicity, which certainly extends to communication. Have you ever noticed just how attracted the self-titled academics and intellectuals are to complex new linguistic terms and labels? Much like name-dropping, many of these types will look for an excuse to make use of them, and in some cases be smugly satisfied when the listener has no idea of the definition, which they can then explain to their inferior. This is not efficient communication. This is ego gratification and grandstanding, and it's the action of a deeply insecure mindset. And its net effect, aside from being annoying and causing us to communicate in a less pure and genuine and meaningful way, is often a further cluttering and polluting of language, resulting from our being enamored with our own intellect and the sound of our own voice, and thus spinning out into countless unfruitful directions. So while it suits the other side to frame all existence in relativistic terms, and to paint all people and nations and cultures and ideas as equal, and of equal worth and value and utility and merit, I hope this helps lay out just why these opinions are madness, and why they inevitably usher in chaos and degeneration, and why they need to be so strongly resisted. This is the unnatural, one might even say anti-nature, at play. Within healthier eras, these ideas and those who voice them are firmly kept in check as societal aberrations. In our age, in which we've so glorified the maladjusted and vilified the divine as reflected in nature, the monsters are proudly on parade, with a haughty and hateful sneer towards beauty, grace, nobility, and thus God himself, the eternal rebels, and so often rebels without a cause, other than petulant rebellion. Much like those Take Back the Night campaigns in which the law-abiding of a community would march to reclaim, if only symbolically, the streets from the criminal element seeking to overwhelm them, we need to begin to do some reclaiming of our own over the coming years. And it really does begin, in part, with this root recognition. Both sides aren't equally right in their perspective and worldview. One is, at its best, essentially allied with nature, with balance and harmony and growth and creation. The other, at its worst, really does appear as something of a maddened death cult, to speak frankly, and their triumph would cost the world everything. I believe our role is to prevent this from coming to pass, and though things have looked bleak, especially when playing forward the trends of the recent decade or two, I do believe these forces have finally hit a wall, and we're now collectively turning a corner. And though it may be a difficult fight, with countless variables and unknowns, I do believe I know how this story ends. Thanks for listening.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend. The end of our elaborate plans. The end of everything that stands. The end, no safe